Hello, hello, hello! It is me, the Purple Sharpie, at Game Devs of Color Expo 2024 with yet another game developer interview. Today, we have a member of Mother Gaia Studios, Victor Cesario, who is a producer and engineer on staff. How are you doing today, Victor?
I'm doing great, Sharpie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you and fantastic to have you here. I believe we're here to actually talk about you guys' latest project, the Posthumous Investigation. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So the Posthumous Investigation is a murder mystery visual novelish adventure where you control a private investigator who is trapped in a time loop until they solve the crime.
Well, let's go ahead and break out of this loop by running the trailer right now. So Victor, as we saw inside of that trailer, the game is obviously have very heavy noir-based references, and it's very, very grungy and detective-y and beautiful in that regard. But it's actually based off of a very famous story from Machado de Assis, who's a very famous Brazilian author. He actually wrote several novels, short and long, inside of the late 1800s. He was known as actually being the Black Brazilian author who's credited with bringing the realist movement through his work into literature. Talk to us about the references and a lot of the inspiration that you grabbed from his work.
Yeah, of course. So Machado is arguably the biggest name in Brazilian literature. So he was born in 1839. He grew poor. He was self-taught. He rose to fame. And slavery was officially abolished, right, in 1888. So he lived through all of that. He lived through the fall of the Brazilian monarchy. So it's all in there in his work in some shape or form, right? And at a first glance, people might think he wrote his stories to entertain the elite. But when you read into his work with a keen eye, you realize that actually criticizing them, showing how hypocritical and vain, superficial most of them could be. And that's a trait of his work that hopefully we tap into in our game.
And we see that throughout the entirety of the demo version of this game, with several characters, including a character who plays the main deceased character's sister, showcasing a lot of how the elite isn't necessarily held to the same standards that the average layman is. And I'm really happy that you introduced that social commentary inside of the game. Speaking of the more social commentary aspects of the game, throughout the game, there are littered political posters. Brazil is not new in any way, shape, or form to the political discrepancy of the political scene. As in 2022, there was a very heavily contested election between Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Jair Bolsonaro, who unfortunately was, or I should say, depending on how you feel about politics, was luckily not reelected for a second term. And Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva actually is currently serving in office to this day. Talk to us about the importance of the political structure as it pertains inside of the general lore of this game and your personal decision to put political posters inside of the game. Was it social commentary? Was there something that you were trying to call attention to?
This political contest in Brazil is nothing new, right? As an underdeveloped country, we have been dealing with this ever since society started, right? And I believe that we saw in Machado's work an opportunity in one of their characters to portray and put that into our game and talk specifically to what is happening around us, like currently, right now, right? And we are so fortunate that Machado is an author that was perceptive of what was happening around him and was able to channel that into his work, so that we have a lot of things to grab from their characters and from their stories. And being able to comment on our current political scenario by using a character from the 1800s is very, very rich to put in perspective. Because one thing that is known is that Machado was actually really conservative in his political views, and he was pro-monarchy, and that is a way for us to put that in this position, juxtaposition actually, and put these two different perspectives and make them clash and try to tell a new story out of that. So I think it is very interesting.
You all actually did an amazing job of it, because as you traverse through this universe, actively watching and looking for a murderer, these political undertones and societal undertones are very, very strong throughout the game. So I want to really applaud you all on the ability and you guys' way to pay homage to Machado's work, specifically in that way, and obviously through the current socioeconomic climate and political climate that you all are actively moving through to this day. I want to pull the conversation towards the game mechanics now and actually talk directly about some of the game mechanics that you have. As we saw inside the trailer, this is a noir detective-based game. It's nothing new inside of this genre. Other narrative games have frequently used it. We see a file, which tells us more information about the case inside the settings. We have statements from people that we interrogate, and we also have the ability to go ahead and interrogate and talk to different people and find out more about them and the deceased inside of this instance. Talk to us about where you grabbed more inspiration for this specific genre and any other games that may have given you guys kind of clues about how you wanted to move forward in this project.
The research was huge. There were a lot of games that we looked into. We looked at classic adventure games. We looked at Green Fandango for clues on how we can put together a script for the game and a sequence of the events and the clues, where they go or in which order you take them. We looked into lots of time loop games. So we played Sexy Brutal, we played 12 Minutes, we played even Outer Wilds Minutes. We went like all around the place and take games with time loop mechanics, see what we could pick, what we had to leave. And I believe that I'm a really, really, really diehard fan of the Ace Attorney series. And I saw that project as an opportunity for me to put a little bit of my love for that series into this. So hopefully, if you like Ace Attorney, you're also playing and thinking about it, the way you interrogate the characters and you talk to them, the way they respond and they react to your questioning. And we're trying to, it's a big soup of all of those things. And we're trying to make something that feels different, yet grounded in all of those experiences.
The inspiration from Ace Attorney is actually really, really visible throughout the scene, not exclusively just through the mechanics inside of the game, but even when you're talking to the characters, a lot of the characterization in there calls homage to several different characters inside of the Ace Attorney and several other mystery game scenes. So fantastic, once again, job on that. I want to actually talk about the music inside of the game, which is very, very distinct. So Very frequently inside of games like this, there will be background music, but this game does not have that. This game opts to actually use ambient music as the default, meaning that when you're inside the detective's office, you're not hearing any other music. You're just hearing that fan going around. You're hearing the AC or the window. You're hearing a little bit of outside, possibly cars going through or papers ruffling. And when you go out onto the street, you hear birds, you hear cars, and it's not until you start deciding to talk to someone of note, specifically like a main character, or you're investigating someone, that music actually comes into play. Talk to us about the decision to make the music kind of emphasize the gameplay rather than just being a default standard throughout the game.
That was an idea that came from our audio designer. So he wanted a way to utilize our limited resources in music to emphasize the main aspect of the game, which is the interrogations, right? Mm-hmm. We want the player to dive into the characters because those are the bread and butter of the game. Those are what Machado was all about, right? And we want the player to feel that and to know the characters and to relate to them and to maybe cheer for them, even though they're suspects. Maybe you want to cheer for them. Maybe you like some of them and you hate others. And the way the audio designer found to emphasize that was by subtracting the music from certain parts of the game so we could put it when the interrogation is happening or when special things are happening on screen, right? And when he said that, we all loved it immediately, and we started playing around with it, and we were really happy with the results. The response was great, and we decided to keep it. But it's a work in progress. We are making new music for a few other parts of the game. We're also working on our ambient sounds. So we're trying to make the quality, even though there's no music, the sound that is there, we're trying to make it as high quality as we possibly can. So it's all good, not just the interrogating parts.
It is very, very distinct as well. And like you said, it does emphasize a lot of the movements inside of the game. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the talking aspect of the music. That's just drums. It's exclusively percussive. There's just kind of like a drum beat that comes down. And it's not until you start interrogating that you hear almost like a Rhodes organ or an electronic piano start to play and kind of come through. And then in the ultimate moment, when you're talking and there's a heated conversation, that's when you get synths and you get all these crazy bass sounds and stuff, and it sounds like a fight, you know? It really is an immersive aspect of the game, and I wanted to just call attention to that even inside of this early version of the demo, because I can't wait to see what the finished product looks like, and I'm very happy to hear that you all are actually polishing the ambient sound even more. I always say, if something ain't broke, don't fix it, and I think you all really move forward with that way of thinking as well. Let's move forward with another mechanic inside of the game that I actually want to talk about, which is the time-based clock system inside of the game. As you play the game using the unnamed detective at the time, there's actually a clock that appears at the top center of the screen that shows when an hour goes by. There are different time-sensitive aspects and suspects and conversations that you can access depending on what time of day it is and what specific hour it is. In addition, items that you receive throughout the day, they actually expire at the end of that day, which gives the player a sense of urgency towards completing and moving forward throughout the story. Talk to us about the decision to add this time-based clock mechanic inside of the game and what you felt the importance of it was inside of this story.
Yeah, so the thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and you might or might not already know about the game, is that the person who hires you to find out who killed Brás Cubas is Brás Cubas himself, is the ghost or whatever you want to call it. So he sent you a letter after he died, hiring you, practically forcing you to solve his murder, and he traps you in a time loop as well. So this is where the mechanic came from first, because we wanted to do it that way, because the whole project is actually based on a game jam that was made by Mother Gaia in 2014. I wasn't even at the company at the time. And it was a time loop game already. So we just took that and we just kept that. And then we introduced the motive and the Brás Cubas plot and all of that. And so the time loop mechanic was a way for us to tap into what was happening around the indie scene, the game scene at the time, and a mechanic that was novel, that was interesting to play around with. And I guess, yeah, that's it.
Victor, I want to thank you again for talking to us today about the game Posthumous Investigation, and I wish you all such success on your Q4 2024 release later this year. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. That was lovely.
Everybody, that's going to do it for yet another game developer interview here at Game Devs of Color Expo 2024. As always, we highly recommend supporting these devs by wishlisting the Posthumous Investigation on Steam and checking out even more of their future projects on their Twitter and Instagram page. As always, we are not done. We have even more Game Devs of Color Expo 2024 coming up. Stay tuned.